Welcome to the Captains at Center Ice podcast. As always, click that like and subscribe button and leave a comment down below on your opinions as well as what you thought about today's topics. Without further ado, let's bring the captains to center ice. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Captains at Center Ice podcast. I'm your host Joshua Kessner, and today I have my good friend Ryan Coast with me. Ryan, say hi.
Hello, listeners. It's good to be back.
Yeah. So today we're going to have a very interesting conversation regarding some things that are going on in the NHL before Thanksgiving break. We will not have a podcast next weekend due to Thanksgiving and holiday season. Ryan and I will both be out of town for that. So because of that, we will not be having a podcast. So you will see us starting in the first week of December, where we will begin our starting podcast, if you will, of breaking down specific divisions for each week in the month of December. Look at those divisions, see how teams are doing, give our thoughts and opinions on that. So,
which I'm looking really forward to. I think that's going to be a fun discussion topics.
Yeah. We have not decided which one we're going to start with yet, so that'll be a surprise for all of you. But otherwise, that'll be a fun month for us because we get to break down all the teams. And because of that, we're kind of doing a little bit different topics. So today will be a little bit different. It's a little bit more nitty-gritty, if you will, from what we normally do. So today, here are the topics we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about Mike Babcock. We're going to talk about the Garnet Hathaway suspension. And yeah, we'll go from there. So that being said, let's start with the Mike Babcock situation. So for those of you who don't know or
live under a rock.
Yeah, you live under a rock. The Toronto Maple Leafs on last Wednesday, this past Wednesday, I should say, fired Mike Babcock before going on their road trip. So they brought up their AHL coach, who is really good friends with Kyle Dubas, and because of that, he is now head coach. Coaching style seems to be similar. It doesn't seem like it's any different. I'm looking for. Hold on, I gotta find his name. I know I have his name for some reason. I have it somewhere in here. But that being said, I wanted to ask you. Let's focus on Mike Babcock while I look for this. I want to know, Ryan, what your thoughts are on this situation as a whole. Did you expect this to come out of Toronto? At least this early in the season, if you did expect them to potentially fire Babcock. What are your thoughts on the situation?
I definitely saw a lot of Maple Leafs fans from social media sites like Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram asking for Mike Babcock to be fired, demanding him to be fired. And I'm sure the news outlets were demanding, like, why hasn't this been done either? So I guess I'm not shocked that it happened, given the performances and that where they are sitting right now in position wise. I'm not shocked.
Yeah, I guess I'm not. I was shocked that they did it so early. And maybe I shouldn't be shocked because
Sheldon Keefe is the coach.
Sheldon Keefe, thank you. I was blanking on his name. I apologize, viewers. I was blanking on his name. But that being said, yeah, I was surprised that they did it right before the road trip, at the very least. So I have a lot of mixed feelings about this, but for the most part, I have relatively good feelings for the Toronto Maple Leaf team as a whole regarding this situation. I think it was a good move. I'm just surprised that they did it a little as early as they did.
I
Um,
think the more proactive you are, though, in a situation where the Maple Leafs have expectations, I think the more proactive you are, the better,
yeah,
because you could wait it out, but then if you wait it out, maybe you waited too long and you could have gotten wins where you didn't, and those points would have helped you make your playoff push for a better seed. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. No, I agree. I'm not disputing that by any stretch of the imagination. Um, I just know that I was surprised that they went with it. I will say from what I've heard, Kyle Dubas and Mike Babcock seem to have had some issues together. They don't see eye to eye clearly. Um, I think a good example of that is Dubas bringing in Tyson Berry. I don't. I think he. I think Dubas thought that Tyson Berry should play a specific role. Mike Babcock clearly did not think that. He he clearly had a specific role in mind, and that was the bench for the most part. But um, I, I mean, let's be honest here. Hockey times are changing in terms of coaching style, in terms of play style. And Mike Babcock refused to adapt to the game that was around him. And I think part of that affected his team. And they ended up playing poorly under him, and because of that the result was he got fired. So,
And as we're talking about this, the Tyson Berry just got a standing ovation from the Avalanche fans and everything for thanking him for his service as he is now a Maple Leaf. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there,
yeah.
which is kind of classy.
Yeah. Um that is really classy. That is really cool. I back to the Mike Babcock situation. Um I am interested to see how Sheldon Keefe does as coach. I mean, I know they won their first game under him, and while that's impressive, I'm not holding my breath because I'm not sure that that one game is going to be indicative of the whole season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, because of that, let's talk about the new coach. In your opinion, do you?
I
I want to
from
go ahead. Go ahead.
from my perspective, I've seen AHL coaches have success. Look at Jared Bettner; he's had really good success coming from the AHL and ECHL. So, in my experience, I feel like there can be success coming up from the league, coming up from the minors, and having success as a coach. Um, Now, player is a different story because that's all about skills and tangibles. But as a coach, you kind of have some flexibility on how good you can be.
Yeah. And I definitely think that the coming up for the minors is it's a new trend,
Yeah,
obviously. Um, so I mean, we're seeing this more and more with teams. I know Anaheim's did it. They brought up their minor league affiliate coach. I think the most looked at example, like being like, oh, this is most like this situation, is the Chicago situation when Chicago fired Coach Quenville and they brought up their AHL affiliate coach. I It's a little bit different,
oh, in terms of like how the situation unfolded and everything.
right? Yeah, because
Oh, okay.
Quenville
Because I
got
was like, because my confusion was that if the best scenario was probably how the Avs turned out. I mean, it wasn't a great season, their first season, but obviously it got better, and I think it's worked out very well for them to have Jared Bettner.
yeah.
But given the situation that the Chicago Blackhawks, I totally agree.
I mean, it's a little bit different in the respect though of this. Joel Quenville, when he got fired, um, he had already won 3 cups with
Yeah,
Chicago. He had brought that team to utter, the one of the strongest teams in the league, right? And then Jeremy Colleton had to come in and fill his shoes.
yeah.
And so I guess is a similar situation, except for the fact that, let's be honest, Mike Babcock's only won one Stanley Cup, even though
I thought
he won
he
once in Detroit.
oh, I thought he won two.
No, he went to two. He went to two Stanley Cup
Oh,
finals with
okay.
Detroit back to back, but he only won one of them.
Oh,
And
okay.
the other thing is, I mean, he went to the Stanley Cup final in 2003 with when he was coaching the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, and they lost to New Jersey. But that being said, um, it's a different situation because he came into this team. He's only been around for, I don't know. He's only been around for 3 or 4 seasons
Yeah.
versus Quenville, who was around for a lot more seasons, and he was there coaching the team to success, whereas Babcock has not made it past the first round with Toronto.
Hmm.
Um, so that being said, a little bit different. Um, so I want to talk about the what's your placement, good or bad move by Toronto? It sounds like you're saying it's a good move. Am I hearing you
Yeah.
correctly?
Yes, I think it was a good move. I think the more proactive you are, the better you leave, the better opportunity you give your team. And if you think firing the coach was the best move for you, then the sooner the better. Because as proactive as you can be, gives you more opportunities to win more games and get more points, leading to a better position in the seedings.
Yeah, I
But there is the argument that I'll counter it with, like it. All that matters is getting into the playoffs. That's all that matters. But you still want a good position,
right,
I
right.
think,
Yeah, I would agree.
because if they were to play the Penguins or something, I don't think they would win that series.
No,
But
yeah. No, I agree. I don't think they would win that series. Um yeah, I guess that would be another question. So while it is in your opinion good, does this make them Stanley Cup contenders? I mean, it,
I,
many people had them as a Stanley Cup contender going into the season, right? Do you do you see them that
with
way?
how the team's set up, I don't see him as a Stanley Cup contender. I see him as a playoff contender, but I don't see him as a Stanley Cup contender because they're too offensively loaded. They don't have a balance for
Right,
me.
right. They're
Their philosophy right now is how many goals can we score and can that be enough?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Defense is clearly their biggest issue. Um, yeah, I would agree. I don't see them. I think it's a. Here's my opinions on the situation. I think it's a good move. I know that Sheldon Keefe was told by Toronto Maple Leafs management while he was coaching the Marlies to play how the Maple Leafs play. So that way, when players transition into a Toronto Maple Leafs spot, Toronto they fit in just fine in Toronto. That being said, I think he coaches obviously a little different. That's not that's not up for debate. I think that it comes with every person who coaches. They put their personality on the bench. But that being said, I do think that there is a level of similarity, if you will, with how he's coaching. He's not drastically changing the Toronto Maple Leafs play. We're not going from a strictly offensive coach to a strictly defensive coach. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's very much a similar style of play still. So that I think that's a good thing. It's a gradual transition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I agree with you. I don't see them as a Stanley Cup contender. And honestly, I have a lot of questions not only in after the offseason with all the signings and whatnot with Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews and all of that. I have a lot of questions regarding the team as a whole now as a Stanley Cup contender. But
Do you think Kyle Dubas should be fired for that trade,
what trade?
for the Barry Kadri Kerfoot trade?
No, I don't think he should be fired for it. However, I think that there will be other reasons on top of that. Like I don't think that's a let me specify. I don't think it's a main thing.
Yeah,
Like it's part of an issue, but I don't see it as like this is the reason you should be fired, right?
yeah.
I see it as supplement to that. I think that there are two really big reasons that he should be fired if the team doesn't get anything going. Number one, Austin Matthews' contract. Number two, Mitch Marner's contract. I mean, it's plain and simple. And in fact, you could
Well, they were always going to have to pay them though, no matter what,
right.
given their production. So
I
I don't know.
I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing that they shouldn't be paid. The problem is that if
You don't think they deserve Connor McDavid money?
no, I really I don't. I mean, I as much as I struggle with Connor McDavid making that much money, and not because Connor McDavid doesn't deserve that money, but because like the Edmonton Oilers are now in a massive trap because they don't have any players or any cap space to bring in any players to be a Stanley Cup contention team.
Hmm.
I'm not saying they can't make it to a Stanley Cup final because we've seen that happen before, but the chances
Hmm.
of that happening are a lot slimmer now. Same thing
Hmm.
here. Austin Matthews is a completely offensive player. He is not a 200-foot player. Um, Mitch Marner, same thing. He's an offensive player. He is not a 200-foot player. Yes, he can carry the puck. Yes, he can. He's really impressive to watch. Um, and I mean, let's be honest. John Tavares' numbers have gone down this season. Now, granted, injuries are a part of that, but I think I think teams have figured out how to play against Mitch Marner. He's not as effective as he was last season. He's still putting up points. I'm not saying he's not putting up points, but he's not as effective as he was last season. And maybe he's going through that drought because for some reason star players when they get into a big contract, for some reason I've noticed this, they get into a big contract and it's like there's this burden on them once they get into the contract, like they have to earn that
Well,
money.
they have to earn it. I
It's
mean,
true. It's true. I mean, we saw it with Connor McDavid. When Connor McDavid signed his big thing, he struggled at the beginning. Granted, it was the beginning half of the season, and I think the same thing could be happening here. That's not to say Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, and John Tavares can't pick up their play. I'm not
yeah.
saying that at all. But I mean, the question becomes why are you signing for why are you giving in and signing these players for that much money when you still have a ton of holes to fill and now you can't fill them? I mean,
Yeah.
it comes to the question of, and I don't want to get into this, but there was a question that I heard all right, let's compare like just Mitch Marner to other wingers. Who would you rather have, Mitch Marner or Braden Point, right? And they like uh it was either TSN or I think it was TSN. TSN, I was watching it and they were going through and Mitch Marner was not winning everything. Like
Yeah.
people weren't going Mitch Marner every time because and so I guess the question is he worth that much money to you? Now clearly Mitch Marner thinks he is and his dad thinks he is, but I don't know. I don't want to get too much into that, but I think the contract issue along with some poor movement is enough to put Kyle Dubas on the hot seat because
Oh, I agree.
beforehand Mike Babcock was on the hot seat
And
because
I
he
think
was the
that
coach.
I think the hot seat is already inflated because you're in Toronto.
True. That's
You're
very
in Toronto.
true.
You're always on the hot seat with that kind of media. It's like New York doing their sports. You're always on the hot seat no matter what you're doing, right or wrong.
Right. Yeah. And I would agree. And I think, see, this is the thing that Kyle Dubas is going to end up realizing. Mike Babcock was kind of his, like, uh, I don't want to say guinea pig, but like his scapegoat, if you will.
Hmm.
And now he's not there. So now all eyes are on him if this team doesn't succeed.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to watch for the rest of the season. I still think it was a good move. I'm not disputing it wasn't a good move, but I'm not sure it's going to save Kyle Dubas's job.
Hmm.
And granted, Kyle Dubas is really young. Like, I'm still surprised he's in a position of high
Yeah,
management.
he looks like he's in his 20s,
Yeah, and
but he's like 33. But even that's still young.
it's still young. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, most people who are GMs are
40s
40,
or
40 at youngest
yeah.
usually, right? So it's interesting to see this, and I don't know. Well, you brought up a very valid point. Toronto is Toronto, so it's going to be. There's already a ton of pressure in Toronto, right? To perform, to succeed, whatever. So, uh,
Hockey's religion in Canada. So if you don't like are up to snuff, they'll sniff you out real quick.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it was when Mike Babcock came in, it was very much a all right, we got a good coach. And then they got the first overall pick with Austin Matthews. And it was like, okay, maybe we can get somewhere with this, right? And the rebuild was happening. And then they made it, and they go to the first round. They lose in the first round to a very good Washington team. But it was still a good series. And so, Toronto fans are like, all right, cool. We made it to the first round. That's cool. Then they get to the next playoffs and they make it to the first round again. And they're like, all right, cool. We should see at least some improvement in this. And they lose in the first round again, right? And
Hmm.
then they get to the playoffs again, right? And they get to the first round against Boston. And now Toronto's expectation is we need to surpass this. We need to be in the second round at the very least, right? See some
Hmm.
movement in playoff play. And they didn't get there. So it raised a lot of questions. It's interesting to see. Um, so I don't want to talk too much about Toronto. Let's talk more on the Mike Babcock situation for a second, though. Do you see him ending up back in the league? If so, where?
Honestly, I mean, as the pedigree that he has, some team is going to be desperate. So I see him coming back to the league. Where, um, if the Wild keeps struggling, he might go there,
Yeah,
and I think they will. He could go there. He could even. I wouldn't be surprised if Chicago s- looked around at him, gave him an interview.
yeah,
Um, Given their struggles and everything. So I would look at those two teams to maybe look at them, see if that's a viable option, and that's all I can think of. Do you have any suggestions of where he could land?
yep. My three teams right now are in my head that I immediately jump to are Detroit, Chicago, and Minnesota. My first pick out of those three teams where I could see him landing would be Minnesota, and that's just
Yeah,
because the team's already kind of built in the way that he would like them to play. They have Bruce Boudreau is an absolute terrible coach right now, and
he's never been a good coach.
fair, uh, and so you know what I mean. Like that would be my first pick. The second pick that I would initially go to is Detroit, and that's just because he knows the system, right?
Yeah,
But I could also see Detroit going, no, 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 we don't want you back. We don't want you
yeah.
back. You didn't help. So
He did help in getting them to 22 straight seasons of playoff hockey, though. He was a contributor in that.
he was. But let's also not ignore the fact that that team was still stacked.
Yeah.
right? Now, granted, I'm not saying he didn't. I mean, he knows how to coach hockey, right? I mean, he's won a gold medal with Team Canada, so
Hmm.
he knows how to coach hockey. Might know something about coaching hockey. He's won a Stanley Cup. Might know something about coaching hockey. He just needs to find a team that'll play the style of hockey that he'll play. Which,
Yeah, but I would counter it with, has his style of play surpassed, has he surpassed the league with how his style of play, has it surpassed the league?
yeah, I think, and that's a good question. And I honestly think that
Like, could he win with his style of play? That's what I'm trying to ask.
I think he could, but I think it would be much harder because, I mean, the style of play that he coaches is really beneficial in, well, I want to say it's the most beneficial for him is in the playoffs. That's when it's most beneficial. But that being said, I now coaches are changing. Coaches don't play a static lineup anymore.
Hmm.
Like they coaches change their lineup. Like they're always changing their lineup. They're I mean that's how Coach Quenville won a Stanley Cup. That's how
Hmm.
Daryl Sutter when he was coaching the LA Kings won. That's how the Blues, how they were, they won their Stanley Cup. I mean, heck, look at the Boston Bruins. The reason they won that series is they were changing the lineup of their players as time was going on, and they were changing the strategy of what the players were doing. But Toronto was not doing that because
I'll say this though, Toronto looks really good now. 4-1 already in the first period.
I mean Toronto. I mean, here's the thing. I saw a quote from Austin Matthews that basically said we feel free to play now. Like
Well,
we
they
don't.
look like that right now. Very much so.
Yeah, and
It's we're getting dismantled. It's bad.
um and so I mean the question comes, and I don't have an answer for this, and I'm not asking this as a question. It's just more of a rhetorical thing to think about is what was Mike Babcock really causing that much of a situation for the players to be like so strung up and so stressed out that they couldn't play properly? I mean, because Austin Matthews is an outstanding player. I mean, he's had highlight seasons for the last ever since he's been in the league, right? And he's an outstanding player for who he is, but he seems like he's been struggling a little bit until now. John Tavares, same exact thing. Mitch Marner, same exact thing. Tyson Barrie, same exact thing. I mean, they can win games. I think they could make it past the first round if they pick up their game and start playing the dominant hockey that they know how to play. If they make it to the playoffs, I think they could make it past the first round. The question becomes, is that going to be enough? And we'll find out. So, I it's an interesting topic to talk about, and I could talk for days about it probably because it's definitely an interesting one. Um, Another topic I could talk about would be the Taylor Hall situation. We're not going to talk about that tonight at all, but because that's another big topic that I know will come up later in the season. That
How
being
did
said, oh, go ahead.
no, no, that was about the game. Sorry,
Oh,
sorry, listeners. I'm watching the Avs play the Maple Leafs right now, and it's bad.
okay. So that being said, let's talk. Let's talk. Question number 2 here. So Garnet Hathaway was suspended 3 games for spitting on Anaheim Ducks player Eric Gabranson. And he was also fined $24,153.53. He also did get a game misconduct, a 10-minute penalty in that game. I will read a couple quotes here. So afterwards, Garnet Hathaway said, and I quote, I feel like there were a couple sucker punches thrown, and I got one there really quick, and I reacted a little emotionally. He continues to say, you know, unfortunately, spit came out of my mouth after I got sucker punched and it went onto him. Then Eric Gabranson from the Anaheim Ducks was interviewed, and he said, I quote, "That's about as low as you dig a pit, really." And he continues to say, "It's a bad thing to do. It's something you just don't do in a game, and he did it." So we have two sides of of that viewpoint from the players. I want to talk about this though because I think it's an interesting topic to talk about because we're seeing more and more of it,
Hmm.
of weird things that players decide to do that are not naturally part of the unwritten rules, if you will, of hockey. Right now, there's a rule. There's a rule in the rule book that can't spit, but I want to ask you about this situation, Ryan. What was your takeaway? Well, first let's talk about the suspension. Was 3 games enough for this and the fine?
For me, I think you could have gone five and been that would have been more fitting. It's completely disrespectful to spit in someone's face. Like you just don't do that as a human being, let alone in a sporting competition when you know there are unwritten rules of the game. In sport, really, you just don't you react to the game, not to the player.
Yeah,
And when you react against a player, it's it breaks violations and you lose your head.
yeah. I agree. I think I would probably lean towards the 5 games as well, but I will go with the motto: a couple games here or there difference in terms of the suspension, not a big deal. I'm not gonna be like it has to be 5 games. 3 games is I think 3 games is still valid. I'm not. It's a little bit lower than what I would expect, but 3 games is still 3 games. The fine on top of that, I think, makes it more valid. If they had not fined him, I would be a little bit more questioning. He also did get a game misconduct in the game, so he did get punished in the game. He got fined and he got suspended. I think that's more than enough in terms
Yeah,
of
I would agree,
punishment.
but I just think 5 games would have set the tone better
It
for
would.
other players around the league. Say, hey, we're not gonna stand for this.
Yeah.
We're not gonna stand for this or the Bruce Marchand crap. We're just not gonna deal with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you know,
that's I mean, and you bring up a valid point. So let's talk about the Brad Marchand incident where he licked Ryan Callahan. Um and he did not get suspended. He just got warned by the NHL that said, "Hey, don't do this again or you're going to get suspended."
hmm
And he had done it multiple times. So, where like in terms of leniency with between the two, do you think that Marchand should have gotten suspended in that situation versus this situation? Now, granted, he didn't spit; he just licked him. But
I mean, I think he should have been suspended at least 2 games. It's a situation that the league has never seen before, so they didn't really know how to handle it. But I thought the sterner you are, the better message you send.
yeah, I I also agree. Uh, so in terms of their reaction, Ryan, what was your thought process about how they reacted? Like Garnet Hathaway just saying, "Oh, spit just flew out of my mouth."
I thought they acted accordingly to the situation, but my thought process on the 5 games is due to those quotes that he said, he didn't learn anything from 3 games.
It's true.
So you might as well say, hey, so you want to play games? We'll play games too, and give you 5 games suspension, and then you can think about your actions.
Yeah, I would agree. Um, I'm a
because he's basically taunting the NHL to find me, to do something about it.
yeah. Well, and I mean he. Not that I expect this out of an NHL player, because most times they don't take responsibility for their actions. But when I mean he basically was just like, oh yeah, no, it just happened. Like, no, that was an intentional thing. We all know that was an intentional thing because there was a ref in between them. It like if spit just flew out of your mouth, it would have just dribbled onto your jersey. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we all know that you intentionally did that.
Yeah.
Um, there was a sucker punch thrown in there by Gabranson while the ref was tying both of them up. What I mean, do you feel like Gabranson should have also been suspended in that situation?
No, because sucker punches are known in the league almost, and they're almost like, as bad as it sounds, they're almost like, what's the word I'm looking for? Promoted in the
Yeah,
league. Like NHL kind of thrives on letting fights go and letting them happen. Like I know it's a new league and fighting isn't in the league anymore, but when it does happen, they like to promote it.
yeah, that's true. I think that's a very valid point. I do think the ref might have stepped in a little bit early. Well, no. I mean, in this game, I think he actually probably stepped in on time because there were already 55 minutes worth of penalties involved in it. Um, I mean, you have Washington and Anaheim. They're both playing heavy body hockey. They don't play the speed game. They play the heavy hitting, the I'm gonna take you out as hard as possible kind of hockey. It is what it is. I mean, I I was surprised that he did not get suspended. Like, I honestly thought that maybe they would suspend him for one game. Like, not a lot, but one game. But clearly, I mean, sucker punches have been an issue going into the season,
Yeah.
and it's a topic that a lot of people are talking about.
I
Um,
mean, if they really wanted to get hard on sucker punches, then they would get hard on goalie crashing.
True. It,
Like it's just a fact. Like goalie goalie crashing and what ensues afterwards is definite. Like if you want to get fighting out of the league, then you attack that.
right. Well, and I mean, the first fingers are pointed at the refs because sucker punches really happen because of the refs. You know what I'm saying? Because when a because the ref ends up tying up the other player, so he can't make a move. Like they're in they're in the initiation of where we want to fight, and the ref comes in and is breaking them up, and is holding one of the players back, and one player gets an arm free and throws a punch. So I think the next thing that's going to be reviewed for in the off season, in the upcoming off season, is going to be, all right, this was clearly a problem. How should the refs handle this?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's already been a close look at the refs. There's already been a close look at the refs over the last 3 years. Like, hardcore, the refs are doing everything wrong kind of deal, whatever. Which I don't agree with. I think hockey should be played. I'm not a big fan of coaches review for everything. I think it's a little much. I don't mind it for playoffs, but for regular season games, it's a little much for me. But
I think they deserve challenges though in the game. Like
I don't
maybe
mind.
two.
I don't mind like challenging a goal. Like,
Oh, okay.
I don't mind that, but there's a lot of like, I'm gonna challenge this as offsides, or
Yeah.
I mean, granted, I
Well,
guess they have to, but
they have to challenge that in accordance to your argument of challenging if it was a goal or not.
I guess that's fair. Um, I, to me, the more I'm just
I understand where it slows the game down and the challenges should be limited to certain things.
Right.
I understand that point, but I think eliminating challenges from the game is a little much because refs get it wrong too, and they need a second look at things.
I guess that's a fair point. I naturally worry about them adding more reviews to things like,
Hmm.
was this face off actually a good face off, or weird,
Hmm.
just weird minor things, because we
Hmm.
all know that more cameras are going to get added. That's a whole different topic. I don't want to get into that, but so it'll be um, yeah, this situation as a whole is interesting. I think you and I both agree, though. 3 games plus the
Yeah,
fine plus the 10-minute game misconduct.
it was a fair judgment,
It was a
not the
fair,
one that we wanted, but fair.
right. And I've seen worse come out of uh, judgments like this, where it's just like, that's insane. Like, why
Hmm.
is he not suspended for more? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, like for example, the whole when the Avs player got, I think it was in 2000. The guy was, or let's look at, for example, blowing the whistle when a player's down on the ice, bleeding, and they don't stop the penalty.
right,
That should be challengeable. How
right.
do you not stop a play when a clear player is injured, bleeding out of his head?
Yeah. That
And
actually happened recently too, and that
yeah,
was
and Matt
Vancouver.
Calvert.
Yeah. Vancouver was playing. I think they had a power play at the time or something.
That's
And
what should be challengeable. How
and
you do not blow a whistle on that is beyond me.
well, and I mean, let's be honest, the player was down. It was obvious he was in agony. Like,
Yeah.
severely hurt. Like, he wasn't selling it. You know what I mean? And the refs let the play continue, and Vancouver got a goal off of it. And that was a whole different situation. But it goes to our whole point of the refs are going to get looked at.
Hmm.
Like, it's going to get more and more tight for the refs, and it sucks to suck. But a situation like that, obviously, it's what are you doing? Like, that needs to be called immediately. And I think
Yeah.
I saw
And
some.
it especially calls for it when there's blood on the ice. You see blood on the ice.
Right. Well, and you know that the athletic trainer is ready to hop over the boards, and he's going, "Come on, blow the play dead. I need to get
Yeah.
over there. Somebody's hurt. Let me do my job." So, stuff like that. The refs are gonna get looked at. They're gonna get looked at this offseason, and it's gonna only gonna get tighter, I think, for them.
Let's hope.
Which is it's a double edged sword. It's a good and a bad
Yeah.
thing, because the more rules you put in place, at some point you're going to overregulate the refs.
Yep, and make it harder for them to call calls and everything. Yep, I understand that. But going back to our points, we agree that the suspension was fine, the game misconduct was fine, and the money fine was good. We thought it should be more, but other than that, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I know we only had 2 topics to talk about today, but I thought they were really in depth for you guys. I think that um, Toronto fans, I think you guys
Have promise from what
you
I'm
still have
saying.
promise. Yeah. It's definitely interesting to watch what's going on in Toronto. I think there have been mistakes made, but specifically in regard to the Mike Babcock situation, I think this was a good move. And I think it was a good move because your GM is wanting to evolve the team, and you had a coach in Mike Babcock who didn't want to evolve how he coached the team or how he had players playing specific roles. So I think that's a good thing. I'm still hesitant to put you guys as cup contenders because I think you have enough holes in your team to not be a cup contender. I still put Boston above you guys, easy. Um, Not saying you can't make it to the cup, but that's my thoughts on that situation. And obviously, with this suspension, I agree with the evaluation. Anything you want to add to that, Ryan?
Yes, I see the Toronto Maple Leafs as a playoff contender. Do I see them as a Stanley Cup contender? Not yet. It's still jury's still out on that. And the player that spit in the face, that was Bush League, and you know it. It was Bush League.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I know I'm a Ducks fan, but I tried to be as unbiased in that in that as possible, because I've seen Ducks players do stupid things, and I would be like, yeah, suspend him, fine him, you know. So anyway, that being said, we'll end the podcast here. We did have another topic that we were going to talk about, but I feel like these two topics were more in depth anyway, and I really want you guys to have quality content from us first before a bunch of topics hit your face, basically. So that's both Ryan and our that's how we want to do these podcasts. So thank you for tuning in. Like, comment, and subscribe as always. Leave a comment down below on what you thought. Do you think that the suspension was worthy for Garnet Hathaway? Do you think that Mike Babcock should have been fired? And how do you see Toronto now that he is fired? Be curious to know what you guys think about that. That being said, I enjoyed doing this podcast with you guys. We will see you guys in the first weekend of December to talk about our breakdown of some of one of the divisions of the NHL. Not sure which one yet, but we will do that in the first weekend of December. Ryan and I are so excited for that, by the way. We've been talking about this for literally like a month.
Yeah. It was a good decision to do this kind of series.
So
it's going to be a 4-part series, so just tune in for that. It's going to be each division, breakdown of each team, and what we think of midway through the season, what our thoughts are and where we see them going, positive or negative direction.
Right. Yep, that's exactly what we're going to do, and it should be fun. Leading up to that, we kind of changed how we did our topics a little bit for you guys, so you don't get too much of our opinions going into those weeks. And so hopefully you enjoyed these topics. That being said, let's end the podcast here. I've enjoyed talking to you guys. Ryan and I will say goodbye to you. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. As always, like I said before, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what you thought about today's topics. Thank you for joining the Captains at Center Ice, and we'll see you in the next episode.